In this video, we'll be learning how to create global page templates. In our last video, we learned how to create a template that was intended to be used for a single or specific page. And one last thing I want to mention about creating templates for single pages is I talked about how WordPress was able to identify what template we intended this page to be used with just by how we named it using what's called the slug or the string that identifies this specific page. So we didn't even have to come down here and select our template. And if you aren't sure what a page's slug is, we can actually come see it on this very page. So I would just come up here to Screen Options, and we have all of these checkboxes. And if you aren't familiar with this, these add meta boxes to whatever page we're viewing. So meta boxes in WordPress, if you aren't familiar with those, are each of these little boxes are called meta boxes. So I could come up here and select the meta box for slug, and if I scroll down, you'll see a new meta box on our page. And here we can view our slugs, or we can make sure we're naming our templates correctly. And we could also customize it if we wanted it to be something different as well. So I'm going to just deselect my slug for now and pull up those screen options. And I'm going to switch back over to brackets. And if you remember back to our prototype, I mentioned that I wanted to have two generic templates that could just be applied to any additional pages we added to our site for a quick, accessible layout. So I'm going to come over here in the file pane and create a new file. And an individual page template is named with a hyphen, and if it's meant to be a global page template, we name it page underscore and then our template name. So we just want to name this something that reminds us what this template is for. So we're going to start with the full width template. So I'm just going to call it full hyphen width. We could use underscores if we want, but I think it's easier to read this way. So that's how I'm going to name mine. And then we want to add all of our template code. So we're going to come, and if you remember, I mentioned that I wanted my index page to be very similar to my full width template. So we're actually just going to select this code and modify it a little bit to save us some work. So I'm going to come here to index.php and hit Control-C to copy that. And come down to our new full width template and just go ahead and paste that in. And then up here in our comment, instead of being a main template file, we want to use that naming convention. We need to tell it our template name. And then after our template name, we're going to call this full hyphen width template. And then we call in our header. And we have our main content width wrapper and most of our page setup. Which one thing I want to change here is I noticed that I accidentally copied one of my classes from my 2-column prototype 2-column entry. So I want to change this from being 2-column entry to being full width entry, just so later if we need a specific class that targets our full width pages, we have that hook available to us. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control S to save here. And I'm going to come back up here to index.php and go ahead and change that as well. So I'm just going to call this index entry since this is my index file. And now we have our full width template finished. I just want it to be 100% width and not be very fancy. We don't need anything special here. It's just going to pull in the content from whatever page or page we use this template with. So I'm going to come down here, and now we're going to create our 2-column template, which will be a little bit different than this. So I'm going to create a new file and call it page underscore 2column.php. And then I'm just going to go ahead and paste that code in here as well. And then I'm going to come up here in my head, and I want to say the template name is going to be 2-column template. And I might also want to specify that based on my mockup, I have my sidebar on the right side. So if someone was editing my site and using this template and they didn't design it, they wouldn't know by default where that sidebar is going to go. So I might go ahead and add it in the template name just to make it a little bit user friendly so they can tell. So I'm going to say 2-column sidebar right. And then as our site grew, maybe we would need later on the ability to have a sidebar on the left, and we could be able to differentiate easily between those two templates. So I'm going to come down here, and we have that 2-column entry class now right for this. And the main difference I want here, we have our loop, so that's looking pretty good. But after this class here for our 2-column entry, which entry is kind of a common class in WordPress that signifies kind of the start of the main content. Right below here, we're going to add a little snippet or a template tag to get a sidebar, because we're not going to build the sidebar directly into this. We're going to create it as a template partial or template part. So I'm going to say PHP get underscore sidebar, so it's very familiar or similar to our get footer and our get header, and then a semicolon, and then a question mark and a right caret. And instead of just leaving it like this, we have the ability to add additional sidebars or mini sidebars. And so I want to pass this an argument and tell it which sidebar we want. So I'm just going to call this main sidebar. So I'm going to call that just main hyphen sidebar and pass it. So it's going to tell our template to look for this specific sidebar. But we don't have our sidebar set up, and we need to go ahead and do that. So in our next video, we're going to learn how to create a sidebar template partial, and we'll also learn how to add support for that and register it as a widget area in our functions.php file.